Thank you for your lecture. One point I found very surprising: when there is so much of exchange between China and India, how is it that this printing press and paper don't seem to have become very popular in India as you would have expected with so much traffic between the two nations?
No, they also did not have the modern printing press. So
Yep.
they had a printing press which was functional.
True.
So you can blame the Mughal rule for that, because there was the Jesuit missionaries who came and actually demonstrated a printing press to Akbar, and Akbar did not show any interest in it. Now just imagine if he had shown interest and got it popularized, then we would have been ahead of China. China did not have this kind of printing press, that the modern one, but yeah, they had a basic one.
Basic one.
Yeah.
The thing
So
is,
the most amazing thing is, how did we have so much knowledge even without printing, right? Even
true.
yeah.
But even until the late 18th century, things used to be written by hand on the Bhojpatra only. Even after all this had happened. I mean, do you have any idea?
No, I think there was some kind of printing. I've heard that there was some kind of block printing, because they knew block printing on fabric.
Fabric, yeah.
So there was, it's not that we didn't know printing at all, because we carried it to China,
Yeah.
but maybe we were not mass producing it.
But we are also not taking paper from China. You see, that is the other part of it. So that is very puzzling for me.
So I'm not sure. I don't have the full picture on this paper part, but yeah, it's a point to note.
The oral tradition was supposed to be more effective in carrying the integrity and the sanctity of
absolutely,
the content.
So, yeah, but oral
did
tradition, of
printing
course,
press
had
distort it by producing lots of myths or stuff which was not well authenticated? So was that a disruption in the tradition, in carrying out the tradition?
You mean the
Was there distortion? Did it distort?
You mean the printed information?
matter.
To some extent, I think so. Yeah, because but then again, once you start relying on paper, your memory also goes down, isn't it? Like even today, we use calculators, and we have stopped adding and subtracting nowadays. So there would have been a bit of disruption, but I think both would have coexisted. If we didn't have that kind of rule, which completely divorced us from our traditional education, I think both would have coexisted. We would have been proud of our heritage, we would have continued with our oral tradition, but we would have used printed books as an aid.
Yeah. So my other question was that where Vedanta students paid less allowance than the regular, or was it more? You said 66%.
Yeah, in that particular, in Theorem, they have said that 66% more to the to the students who are studying the higher subjects.
Okay.
Yeah.
My question is about a hypothetical situation. Islamic invaders came to India and mostly destroyed most of the universities. And even the Spaniards, they went to South America and they destroyed their learning systems along with roughly 90% of their population.
Yes. Correct.
So had these events not happened, where would humanity be as of 2018-18? Would we have colonized the entire solar system by now?
Would we have colonized?
Yes, humanity as a whole.
No, I don't think so. See, I feel that if we had let things be in India without any invaders coming in, so I think these temple universities would have eventually become the famous universities of today. For example, even in US, this Duke and Baylor University, Georgetown, they were all earlier religious centers which became universities. So I think we would have had all these universities, foreign students coming and studying, there would have been collaboration, and I think we would have had equal importance to humanities and sciences. Like what we see today, where we feel that the science students are more intelligent than humanities, that wouldn't have happened, because in our tradition we give lot of importance to languages. So all the subjects would have flourished, and there would have been a lot of give and take. There would have been foreign students studying in different institutions. They would have taken back knowledge. There would have been, I mean, what you're seeing in the US today, a better form of that would have been in India. I feel that. I don't think we would have gone around. We colonized with knowledge maybe, but in a give and take manner. Because you see in Southeast Asia, right? The closest example we can get. So we didn't colonize them. We could have, even the Cholas. It's not like they forced them to change their language.
Actually, since I have a physics background, I was more interested in understanding how much of technological progress we could have made.
I think, we lost those centuries when we forgot what was done by Brahmagupta and Bhaskaracharya. Don't you think somebody would have come along and said, okay, how can we use it? And with foreign students also coming in, I think technology would have been very easy. We already had indigenous technologies. Dharampal has also written a book on how we were producing ice in those days. They were able to produce ice in Delhi. There was no refrigerator, but they actually found a way of using evaporation in such a way that in the between night and morning, they would have very shallow ponds which would freeze water into ice by the next day. So this was something astonishing to the British themselves. They said, how are they doing this? They're producing ice in Delhi, even in summer. So I think technology would not have been a problem. We would have really flourished.
I was wondering, you didn't touch on Arthashastra. I would have loved to see, Chanakya come in, and I saw that, when you see,
Arthashastra, I have mentioned it in the book, but like I have not, of course, he was an expert in governance, right? So, I mean, I have put it in the general cat, Takshashila, student of Takshashila.
Yeah. Today, I think what is happening in the world, of course, this technology is a new disruptor which has come into education. But there is also some very interesting trends happening worldwide. You look at the Scandinavian countries like Finland, etc., who are doing away with the typical education system. The education system which has literally become mass commodified system across the world and led by the Western, industrialization. So somewhere there is an awareness which is coming in worldwide that we need to, become more connected to our own ethos, so to speak. And I guess what is happening in Scandinavia is a little bit of that. And then, of course, touching on some more liberal trends, etc., and exploring, intelligences in a very, very fundamental way, which I'm pretty sure has some historical linkages to our Vedic periods. I'm not very sure between the Vedic periods and the Muslim period what really happened, because the whole concept of Bharat itself had started dismantling due to so many of these rajas, small rajas, and I'm sure there were centers of excellence in some parts of India, but it was not a cohesive whole. That we know.
No, but the civilizational sense of civilizational unity was there. But yes, we didn't really, because there was no threat. The real threat came when the Muslims came. That's when probably they realized. That's how all Shivaji and all these people rose. And the interesting thing is in Finland, what you mentioned, right? So the highest paid people there are the teachers, right? Because they are regarded as the most important citizens in the country. And that reminds me of the Indian ethos, because we gave that importance to teachers, the highest. I mean, the kind of respect that a teacher had, because they knew that the sacrifices that they're making with the family, they're not spending enough time with them, and they're traveling. But teachers also traveled a lot. So the kind of respect that they had, I found shades of that in Finland when I read about it.
And even, the ethos of environment, which is very important.
Yeah.
So my question really was that now that we have some of this, we have Dharampal's work, which some of it I've read earlier, and I'm sure there is more information available in different parts. What are we really learned from them, and what do we now really bring back for us? Because today's papers are full of the way the survey has been done on the educational system, especially the government schooling. We know there's a whole survey going on right now to establish a new education policy, and we know we have a right-wing government which does want to go back and pick up, at least some of the roots. And at the same time, we are in a very modern, very, in an age where things are moving at a pace which we even don't know where it's leading to. So I think what we need to glean from this whole thing is that what do we really bring back to our system? Okay. Some of those experiments, I'm sure, are being carried out by groups of people. But is there
I met somebody today. Yes, he was telling me about what he's doing, and I was very happy. Maybe you'd like to talk about what you're doing?
Yeah.
I'm basically working on method of Purvapaksha being imbibed into Indian education system. So basically, when I was attending a talk by Arvind Nilikandan, co-author of Breaking India, so I could understand that there is a need to bring ancient methods of Indian education system into present education system. So for that, basically my research will have mine is a threefold research now. So basically that will start with ancient jurisprudence. So ancient jurisprudence, if you track the process, how it goes, so it is a 4-step process. So Purva, Uttara, Kriya and Nirnaya. So where I will present my arguments, the other party will present his arguments, the entire trial procedure goes on, and then the judgment will be coming. So after this, there is some prakriya which is called Avadhana prakriya. So Avadhana prakriya, the Pruchakas will give questions to the participant and there will be multiple Pruchakas who will give multiple questions. So after that, after following this Dharana procedure, he'll compile all the answers which he has given to each Pruchaka, and he'll form in a poetic manner. So in that process, he'll just convert from a prose manner and he'll represent in a poetic manner. And when you see Purva Paksha, as Raju Malhotra says in his book, Being Different, so that process is basically all about, like, when we both are parties to a debate, so I'll stand in your place and I'll first analyze your arguments, after which I'll prepare my own stronger arguments. So even he says that this is not about winning or losing, so this is simply about learning knowledge. Because even a debate between a farmer and an officer can enlighten the officer.
Certainly, yeah. Critical inquiries.
Yeah. So my research is basically how to link these three, because as I said, there will definitely be some similarities which I could find between these three.
Are they being used any of these models are being used anywhere in the education systems in the world?
In the world, I can't say. But
there are-
Indian
yeah.
education system, no.
I think the initiatives are happening at a small level in different places. We just don't know them all. And eventually these drops have to coalesce. Because in Bangalore, I know about a school where all of them are Sanskrit enabled, all the children. It's a very good school. I'm planning to visit them. And they are not only teaching them the modern subjects like civics, but they are relating them to Dharma Shastras. So they're teaching them this and then they're relating it to our texts. That's the way they're proceeding. So I want to really go and sit in their classroom and see what they are teaching. I think they're doing a...
You had mentioned that during the Mughal period, not enough attention was being given to education.
Science.
Now, that is those centuries, you will understand, you just go back. Norman the Conqueror did not know how to read or write. Even Louis XIV did not know how to read or write. The kings thought that reading and writing was not their prerogative. Their main aim was the sword and managing the empire. So the main attention was being given to the state administration and the politics. And the teaching part and the learning part was left to somebody else. Even in India, how many kings have you heard of who were good in literature? Very, very few. Very few. Most of them were, by and large, just, if not Anguta Chap, little more than that. They might have encouraged people, they might have encouraged poets and all that in their courts, like in Vijayanagara Empire. But by and large, the kings were not very keen on education themselves. Once the Muslims came. Yeah.
Except Akbar. Akbar was different. Yeah.
Slowly the system may have moved to the Brahmins being the holders of knowledge of a certain kind, and the Kshatriyas were to be taught the warrior education, which is what they're supposed to be doing. The Vaishnavas are probably supposed to be good at financial.
By the way, I
commerce.
forgot to mention that there was a parallel system of education whereby all the artisans were learning their trades, right? So these universities were teaching the Vedic knowledge, but there was a parallel system where people were learning different things, carpentry, jewelry making and various other things, and they were learning by an apprentice method. And yeah, military training was separate, that they had a separate Upanayana for that. Yeah.
May I be forgiven for disagreeing with you, but I think there were many kings throughout our history who've been keen on reading plus writing. And the poet kings, as you mentioned, Vijayanagar, Krishna Deva Raya was a great poet. He wrote his own poems and all that. And you have Samudragupta, who he wasn't, as you said, Anguta Chap. He was he played the veena and all those things. So I think that in contrast, we would actually be more accurate to say that you would be hard pressed to find any king who was not uneducated or illiterate. But as you said, you were true about Alfred the Great. Alfred the Great himself did not know how to read and write. So as far as the Western things go, that is absolutely
Even
correct.
Akbar didn't know how to read and
Yeah,
write, but he
Akbar was the
encouraged
least educated
education.
of the
Yeah.
So the thing is that part of this thing about kings being literate should go back to our much maligned Varna system. In the Varna system, at least every king knows that the Brahmin is above him. So this is an aspirational ideal. So education was actually given more importance per se, merely for the being reason because of the way the setup was. Secondly, there is one word of caution about this oral tradition. I think the oral tradition assumes a lot of importance and genuine importance in the sense of Shruti. So where different Brahmin families are given one particular sutra and they are supposed to do it. So you have Chaturvedis or Tripathis and so on and so forth. But that never meant that it was privileged, oral communication was privileged over written communication for other branches of knowledge. It is actually
you're right.
a stupendous achievement in terms of the Shruti literature.
Correct.
But when it comes to even Smriti,
you're
even
right.
Vedanta, etc., it doesn't matter.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, but if you look at the social structure, 75% of all people would be in the Udyam Tantra or they would be Shudras. So if you look at it logically, it tallies. You know, if there's 75% of the people are Shudras, so it's likely that 55% in those Pathshalas were Shudras. So there's nothing unlikely which I think a myth is being reinforced that, you know, because everyone studied in their own way. So education was not denied.
Most of us, most people are surprised because they thought Shudras were excluded and they were not getting an education.
Yeah, but when you talk about Shudras on Janma based rather than Karma based, so it's not, you know, hard and fast. So
Exactly.
if you look at the social structure, actually, you know, Dharampalji makes that observation right from the archives, but the way we interpret it, I think, is misleading. I wrote an article on India Facts on the Varna Vyavastha, Theory V. And I tried to clarify that, you know, irrespective of whether you believe in birth-based Varna or karma-based, if you live within your roles and responsibilities, your Daitya Kshetra, and your entitlements and rights, that's your Adhikar Kshetra, you will be flourishing. So actually a Shudra who is not an actual Shudra cannot live like a Brahman because he cannot follow the Sanyam and, you know, all the...
Good point.
Yeah. So I think, you know, anyway, it will be a long debate. The other question I had was regarding, you know, Indian and Chinese languages. Why are they so different? Is there a continuum as we move eastwards?
I haven't found any.
Okay.
I really don't understand. No
Like you
similarity
said,
at all.
very interestingly, that Indian professors in China would change their names to Chinese.
Yes.
Now, if you look at Chinese Americans, when they go to America, they also change their names. So, but why haven't we insisted that Islamic names in India should also be indigenous names? You know, as a rule, or let's say Christian names in India should be indigenous names.
That's what we were made that way. We didn't do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
My concern is now, as what ma'am also said, many countries are trying to sort of do a relook at the whole system of education. And it's quite likely they are going to tap into our sources of knowledge, just like they are in many, many other elements, whether it is in medicine, in yoga, and so on. So is there any way where India can sort of, I perhaps shouldn't say the word, but copyright it? It's our knowledge. You know, it's happening in churches, for example, where they're taking passages from the Vedas and trying to sort of, you know, extrapolate them and put them as their own.
Why not? I mean, if we can manage to do it, that would be great.
So, is there anything you're aware of the ministry level where they're trying to? Because we're very late on this, as you're aware.
So much of
We are lost.
It's too late in the day, but I think we can try. Because if you see even everything, you know, the way of the even Pythagoras, for example, it said that he liked the Gurukula system so much that he went back and set up that in Greece, right? Yeah. And there'll be an inner circle of students who are close to the Guru who will get more detailed knowledge, and there'll be an outer circle of students that Pythagoras took from India. I mean, if you want to copyright, I think we have started now, right? We have,
because we have moved in very late. If you recall, even in things like basmati rice, turmeric,
those
you know,
are products,
it took a lot of pressure, you know, to get into that sort of thing.
So, for example, if you read my book, I've spoken about the Madras Method. You haven't read the book,
No,
right?
no.
Okay. So, there was something called the Madras Method. There was some missionary who was traveling around India, and he noticed that the schools had did not need paper or anything for teaching, right? And they were using a big a lump of sand outside the school, on which they were tracing letters and teaching the students how to read and write. So he was so amazed by that. He said, look, they are teaching at such a low cost. Why can't we do this in England? And so he went and wrote that. And he also noticed the mentorship that was he found in schools in India, where the senior students were teaching the junior students, and the teacher would come later and help them out. But he was also, they were learning and teaching at the same time. So he gave a name to that, and he actually gave credit to India. So it was called the Madras Method. But afterwards, I don't know. I think I'm sure the lot of
No,
plagiarization.
because if I may add, what we have is a lot of resistance, which we always say this in the student meetings. We have a lot of resistance to even understanding what you are saying. You know, there'll be a lot of denial even about Pythagoras. There'll be a lot of.
There's an ingrained psychology in us Indians that if someone is speaking English, he is educated.
So that's what Gandhi was talking about.
Yeah.
That's what Gandhi talked about, right? So he said we were better off 100 years before.
In your book, you touched upon Samavartana.
Yeah.
In the talk, you did not mention. Like, it would be quite relevant because today's convocations are like slightly different. It's just a gathering and handing out paper and nothing more.
So there was a sense of sacredness associated with Samavartana also, because they would prostrate before the guru, take blessings. So the thing about the education in those days was that I feel that the students were prepared for life itself. It was not just a career. So they knew how to take care of their health if they felt sick, what to do. They also knew, you know, so all this pranayama and all this, like today we go and learn, especially in classes. Same way, environmental management was inbuilt in every subject that they learned. So nobody had to go and learn environment separately. So if you're learning chemistry, you would know environment would be a part of that. Engineering, environment. So they knew how to live with the environment and they were prepared for life. That was the kind of education we had.
मेरा ये ऑब्जर्वेशन था जब आपने बोला कि मुसलमानों के समय हमारी साइंस और टेक्नोलॉजी ने एडवांस नहीं किया, लेकिन जब हम इतने सारे जो मकबरे हैं, कुतुब मीनार देखें या आप विजय स्तंभ देखें या आप मद्रास के जो मंदिर देखें, उसमें भी तो टेक्नोलॉजी लगी है. ये बात अलग है, ये मेरा प्रश्न नहीं है, एक ऑब्जर्वेशन है, हर कोई अपना मत दे सकता है. ये बात अलग है कि उनमें से कुछ को कन्वर्ट कर लिया गया, लेकिन टेक्नोलॉजी तो लगी उसमें.
वो हम शायद मोस्ट ऑफ द आर्टिसंस सबसे पहले कन्वर्ट होते थे आर्टिसंस. आप जब पढ़ेंगे ऑल दीज इन्वेजन्स, यू विल फाइंड दैट इतने सारे आर्टिसंस को लेके वीवर्स फॉर एग्जांपल, उनको कन्वर्ट कर दिया, इनको कन्वर्ट कर दिया. आर्टिसंस जो भी कर रहे थे, दे वर फॉलोइंग द अर्लियर सिस्टम्स, एंड ऑफ कोर्स देयर माइट हैव बीन सम न्यू वंस. बट व्हाट आई एम सेइंग इज व्हेन द ब्रिटिश केम, दे फाउंड दैट द साइंटिफिक थिंकिंग वाज एब्सेंट. तो वो कहाँ गया वो? दैट वाज
I read somewhere, and again it's a Peter Gyan or something, where the wife of one Mrs. Boole, one Mr. Boole, who is credited with mathematics,
has actually mentioned that this was available.
She has mentioned that Mr. Boole was greatly influenced by one of the Indian mathematicians, and I am talking about the 19th century. So to say that we did not.
Okay, maybe that was too broad a statement, but yes, I'm saying that the Muslim kings did not, really patronize science education, but and they did not. They were, if you see, why did they turn away those missionaries who had brought the printing press and the clock? Jahangir was presented with a clock. He showed no interest in that clock. He just kept it aside. Why did he not try to find out how does this work? Why can't we all have clocks? And so, that's why there was a disconnect between the European science when they came to teach us. We didn't know most of those concepts because that had disappeared in the higher education, I mean.